You notice how he wears his beard. His men thought it was very funny, so they started calling him Sideburns. And to this day it's stuck. You go to the barbershop and they ask you, how do you want your sideburns? That's where it came from. Longstreet made an iffy early decision to send 5,000 cavalry this way here, with some artillery under the command of General Joseph Wheeler around the east by way of Maryville to capture Knoxville's forts and cut Burnside's forces off before they could reach the safety of Fort Loudon. That became Fort Sanders after General William B. Sanders got killed, the first general to be killed. Wheeler ran into large numbers of Union skirmishers and hostile terrain as he reached the Knoxville area. He tried to flank and destroy the Union forces, but they retreated to the forts on the south of Knoxville, Dickinson being one. Wheeler could not penetrate these fortifications. Longstreet, by messenger, ordered his force to return to assist him. Wheeler therefore turned back in miserable weather to join Longstreet on November the 17th, a day after the Battle of Campbell Station. This was extended to, in the meantime, Burnside's delaying action brought his force and all the weaponry they could carry over the muddy Kingston Road to a point near what is now Kingsgate and Bearlair subdivisions along Kingston Pike. Continued skirmishes occurred, and Burnside ordered his troops further back to position on the high ground, which is now along Concord Road, extending west to where the present Farragut Middle School is, and high schools are now located, and east all along the high ground north of Concord Road. And you can see that high ground if you stand near Coles and look east. You can see Concord Hills. That was all hills all through that area there at this period of time. Woods and hills with one muddy road called Kingston Pike. Burnside placed his artillery across the high ground, and infantry under Brigadier General Edward Ferrero on the right flank and Colonel Hartrank on the left. All along the north side of Concord Road, stretching for about 1 mile. Now, 15 minutes later, we think it's approximately 15 minutes later, after Burnside's troops were hastily positioned, 2 divisions of Longstreet's force appeared. Here they are. McLaws and Micah Jenkins, South Carolina and Georgia. And they were trying to envelop them with flanking action. General Lafayette McLaws was to encircle and conduct a flanking action on the Union right. It was repulsed several times, but fierce fighting continued. General Micah Jenkins, a South Carolina man, whose division was to encircle and attack the Union left flank, would take them to the high ground all along Concord Road. The poor weather conditions and the heavy wooded terrain prevented a successful maneuver. The advantage was lost. The 2 forces took up positions and fought with artillery and small arms. The battle started at approximately noon and continued for 6.5 hours. Night fell, and the weather, of course, was miserable. At that time, Burnside gathered all the troops he could get and all the weapons he could carry, physically carry over the muddy roads, and headed for Knoxville. This was the scene, go back just one moment. This was the scene that's painted by Paul Long of this Battle of Campbell Station. This is Kingston Pike. This is Turkey Creek right here. Concord Road would have been right along in here somewhere. This area right here is now where approximately BB&T and Wendy's and all. This was a hill. And over here would be the high school. Back here are the Confederates coming in. And here are the artillery for Burnside's troops and his infantry. Now, these houses right here, I want to point out to you, are still in existence today, and I think most of you know where they are. This one here is on the corner of Campbell Station and Kingston Pike. It existed at this time. It's called the Russell House. This one here is still in existence. It is behind Taco Bell and Firestone. It's been converted over to office buildings. But both of them were used as hospitals. And if you ever get the opportunity and the privilege to go into this house here, you can see bloodstains still on the floor. Night fell and the weather was miserable. At that time, Burnside left. Those 15 minutes could have changed the course of history. General Wheeler and his cavalry did not join Longstreet in time for the Battle of Campbell Station, but was part of the force that pursued Burnside the next day. After the Battle of Campbell Station, which lasted 6.5 hours and saw approximately 970 men killed, the siege of Knoxville was on. I don't know if any of you have seen pictures of this gentleman on the right or this gentleman here on the left. Have you? Has anybody seen these? Okay. Well, let me explain to the rest of you. This gentleman here is 20-year-old James Henry Harrison Brown. He was in the 9th Georgia Regiment. He enlisted at 20 years old in 1861. He fought with Lee and Longstreet all the way through the war. He was here in the Battle of Campbell Station in 1863. The rest of the war he was up in Virginia, and he surrendered at Appomattox. We had the privilege here of knowing his son, James F. Brown, who lived in Tellico Plains. And unfortunately, I'm sad to say that last week, at 99 years and 11 months, he passed away. He would have been 100 years old on February the 14th, Valentine's Day. It was kind of sad because I was hoping I could tell you he was going to be 100 years old in a couple of weeks. But anyway, it was an honor to know him. He's quite a gentleman. He spoke to us several times. And right there is when I think he might have been speaking to us when we dedicated the plaque here at the side of the hall.
When I was teaching at the middle school on both sides of Kingston Pike, sometimes I would take the kids out. I would say, now, just wait, watch out for the bullets, because where you're standing now, bullets used to fly around here back in November of 1863. The fact that they were there, where you're sitting right now, you know, we're close to a lot of very, very important historical places right here. But concerning education in this community, you know, after Campbell Station had been founded, you think, well, where did kids go to school? And so schools were formed, different kinds of schools, and by the turn of the century, from the 1800s into the 1900s, there were several schools, some of them teaching secondary courses also. So the people in the community decided around the turn of the century, around 1902, it was time to get a high school in West Knox County. And so some men got together, and they took notes on this beginning in April of 1902, and they kept records of these notes from April through May up into September. And some of these notes were put in the cornerstone when the building was completed later on in 6. And they decided that they would build a school. So they got the county, and people donated money, they donated labor, they donated building materials. And so in 1903, they started a building, a school building. Okay. This is, that's okay. Go back to where to go, the first one you want to. This is one of the private schools, and when the high school is going to begin, some of these private schools, of course, are going to, so to speak, go out of business. A few continued for a while. We even had a Concord colored children's school, one of the earliest ones from the 1880s, I think. So there were several, and several had secondary schools. The ones that had secondary classes, they would have more students than the other ones. Okay. Here we have the original high school campus now. W.A. Dower gave some land and about 12 acres, and Farragut's going to have access to other acreage around there. But they decided that they would build a building right here. And so as the structure began, like I say, in 1903, all right, you can see it's made of wood. It's up on the hill there. We're talking about where the battle was. And the building then was completed. And they started school in February of 1904, excuse me. They started in 1904, and they had taken the name Farragut. Well, that's proper and fitting that they did, because Admiral David G. Farragut is from this area. He was the most well-known person from the area, and they decided later on that their nickname, of course, would be Admirals, because he was the first full admiral in the United States. So this building began, and they housed 1 through 12. Now, 1 through 8 is going to remain in here until the 1920s, when they will get their own, quote, elementary building. But this building started. By the next year, 1905, a man had decided that Farragut needed to have a football team, and they got, so to speak, uniforms with an F up here. They were all ready for 1906, when they were going to start playing somebody in football. But on March 15th, 1906, this building burned. And all the material and the equipment they had, it burned also. The next morning, the community members got together and said, we are not going to let this stop. Education had always been a very important point of people's lives right here in this area. So they decided to rebuild, and this time not wood. So they built another building, started right then in 1906. It's a brick stone structure. It was a little bit larger, had a big assembly room up there. And this building is going to last from 1906, whenever they did finish it, and I'm not sure when, but it's going to last until 1958. So that's over half a century that this building is going to be utilized as a center of the community. Now, to the left, you see what would be the elementary building, which was built in 1923, and it's going to last a quarter of a century. All right? You can see from, I think, from the south side, this is some land that was utilized to not only study and teach agriculture, but to practice it. The school had, they had at least one brood mare, they had 4 Percheron colts, they had had some chickens, they had a barn, a chicken house, and within a few years, they're going to build a house for the principal. And it was going to be a nice place, it's going to be to the west of the main building. But Uncle Joe was this fella, Uncle Joe Davis. He took care of things. He would call himself the janitor. He did this from 1906 there up until the 1920s. And you can see him occasionally tending to the crops. Farragut was an agricultural school. In 1913, the United States Bureau of Education, now listen to this. This is a bulletin put out in Washington. It said, this is number 49, the Farragut School, a Tennessee country life high school. The University of Tennessee considered this a very special school. It's called the first real agricultural school in the state, and maybe the first consolidated school in the state. One thing that the Farragut School did, so people began to be very proud of what was going on, not just the students, but the courses and what had taken place, and so they decided to go to this exposition in San Francisco. And in 1915, this school got some recognition. It was a school to receive national and international recognition by the publication of the bulletin that I mentioned, and it won the silver medal. This is Farragut now. Farragut won the silver medal and 2 diplomas at the San Francisco Exposition for the second best educational exhibit by the rural schools of the United States. So Farragut was something that they could be proud of. I spoke with a lady today who is over 90 years of age, and she attended Farragut schools in the 1920s and the 1930s. She said, this school was so good. The teachers not only taught the subject matter, but they were concerned for the actual lives of the students, very much so. She said it didn't matter if your parents were well known or not. And I think in the 20s and 30s, there were not a whole lot of folks who were well known. This was an agrarian type of society right here. But she said the teachers were so concerned. And Farragut became the center of the community. Okay? Here we have a picture of some good-looking outfits there. This is, believe it or not, a basketball team. Now, you can imagine when you went swimming with long outfits and things, but this is a basketball team. Things have changed a little bit, all right? And here we have the girls' club. Now, the girls' club used to like to debate the boys' club, and they would kind of go back and forth. But look how they're dressed. They were very proud to be involved with the Farragut School like this, all right? And here we have the men's debate club. This is 1908. In 1907, the world record for an automobile, believe it or not, was 104 miles per hour. You don't tend to think of that. But people were very proud of this particular school. Okay. 1915, baseball team. The people in Farragut not only were involved in academics, but all these other extracurricular activities that they could get in. Now, they didn't have a football team per se at that time, but they certainly were involved in basketball and in baseball, and later on they're going to start the football team again after World War II. All right? So, these schools, these buildings, part of the Farragut campus, you have on the right, you see the big old building there, built in 1906 there.